Operation Barbarossa, launched on June 22, 1941, was Nazi Germany's ambitious plan to invade the Soviet Union. This military campaign marked a turning point in World War II and became the largest invasion in history. Before attacking Russia, Nazi Germany had already conquered several European countries. The path to dominance began with the annexation of Austria in 1938, followed by the invasion of Czechoslovakia in 1939. The Blitzkrieg strategy then led to rapid victories over Poland in 1939, followed by the invasions of Denmark and Norway in 1940. That same year, the Germans swiftly overran Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, and France. In early 1941, after securing the Balkans, including Yugoslavia and Greece, Hitler turned his attention to the Soviet Union. Before launching Operation Barbarossa, Nazi Germany meticulously prepared for the invasion, driven by a mix of ideological ambitions and strategic calculations. Hitler's primary goal was to acquire Lebensraum, or living space, in the east and to destroy the Soviet Union, which he viewed as a stronghold of communism and a threat to Germany's future. In the years leading up to 1941, Germany signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact with the Soviet Union in 1939, a non-aggression treaty that allowed Hitler to focus on conquering Western Europe without fear of Soviet interference. However, the pact was a temporary measure, as Hitler always intended to turn eastward. As early as 1940, detailed plans for the invasion, codenamed Operation Barbarossa, were being developed. These plans involved deploying over 3.8 million Axis troops, 3,300 tanks, and 2,770 aircraft, along an 1,800-mile front. Germany also focused on securing supply lines and establishing forward bases. The German forces were divided into 3 army groups, North, Center, and South, each with distinct objectives targeting Leningrad, Moscow, and the rich agricultural and industrial regions of Ukraine. Army Group North, led by Field Marshal Wilhelm Ritter von Lieb, aimed for Leningrad. Army Group Center, under Field Marshal Fedor von Bock, targeted Moscow. Army Group South, commanded by Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, focused on Ukraine. In response to the growing threat from Nazi Germany, the Soviet Union embarked on extensive military preparations. Despite being caught off guard by the invasion, Stalin had initiated several defensive measures. The Red Army focused on fortifying the western borders, including the Baltic states, Belarus, Ukraine, and the areas around Leningrad, with a series of defensive lines and increasing troop deployments. On the Soviet side, the Red Army was composed of around 5 million soldiers, supported by 24,000 tanks and 20,000 aircraft. Despite their numerical superiority, the Soviets faced significant challenges in organization and readiness. Key Soviet commanders included General Gregory Zhukov, who played a crucial role in the defense of Moscow, and Marshal Semyon Timoshenko, who commanded the southernmost front. On June 22, 1941, the German Wehrmacht launched Operation Barbarossa, initiating the largest and most brutal invasion in military history. At 3:15 a.m., the assault began with a massive artillery barrage, followed by airstrikes aimed at crippling Soviet air defenses and communications. The 3 German army groups, North, Center, and South, advanced swiftly across an 1,800-mile front, targeting Leningrad, Moscow, and Ukraine. The Germans employed blitzkrieg tactics, achieving rapid penetration and encirclement of Soviet forces. The initial days saw significant German successes, with the Soviets suffering heavy losses in men and material. By the end of June, the Germans had advanced up to 300 miles into Soviet territory, capturing over 300,000 Soviet soldiers and destroying around 2,000 tanks and 1,500 aircraft. In response to the invasion, Soviet forces quickly mobilized and implemented several countermeasures. Stalin ordered a scorched earth policy, destroying infrastructure and resources to deny them to the advancing Germans. The Soviets also began organizing counterattacks, although these were initially ineffective due to the surprise and speed of the German blitzkrieg. The Luftwaffe launched pre-dawn strikes targeting Soviet airfields. This crippling blow to Soviet air power allowed the German ground forces to advance with minimal aerial opposition. On the ground, the Wehrmacht employed blitzkrieg tactics to maximize speed and shock. German forces quickly penetrated Soviet lines. By the end of the first week, deep breaches had been created in Soviet defenses. The Army Group North advanced through the Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, aiming to capture Leningrad. By early September, German forces had cut off all land routes to the city, initiating a blockade that would last nearly 900 days, leading to severe food shortages and immense civilian suffering. In Ukraine, Army Group South captured key cities like Lviv and Kyiv. Despite fierce Soviet resistance, the Germans encircled and captured large numbers of Soviet troops, securing the fertile plains for their agricultural and industrial value. Army Group Center, targeting Moscow, moved through Belorussia, capturing Minsk and Smolensk. Despite stiff resistance, the Germans continued their push towards Moscow, capturing hundreds of thousands of Soviet soldiers and significant Soviet equipment. In northern Finland and Karelia, German and Finnish forces coordinated their efforts to push Soviet troops back, aiming to secure the northern flank and control the vital Murmansk railway, crucial for Allied supplies to the Soviet Union. In central Russia, German forces pushed towards Smolensk and Vyazma, deeply penetrating Soviet defenses. They intensified their advance towards Leningrad, aiming to encircle and besiege the city. The battles of Kyiv and the Sea of Azov were significant engagements during this phase. In Kyiv, German forces encircled and captured over 600,000 Soviet troops, marking one of the largest encirclements in military history. Meanwhile, in the Sea of Azov, German and Romanian forces inflicted heavy casualties on Soviet troops, further weakening their southern defenses. The Battle of Moscow was a critical turning point in Operation Barbarossa. The German strategy, codenamed Operation Typhoon, aimed to capture the Soviet capital before the onset of winter. The objectives were clear: encircle and destroy Soviet forces around Moscow and secure the city, which was not only a political and military center, but also a vital transport hub. Despite initial successes, the Germans faced fierce resistance from Soviet forces. The Soviets, under the command of General Gregory Zhukov, prepared extensive defensive positions around the city. As the harsh Russian winter set in, the Soviet defense stiffened, and their counter-offensive strategies began to take shape. In early December 1941, the Soviets launched a major counter-offensive, exploiting the weakened and overstretched German lines. This counterattack pushed the Germans back from the outskirts of Moscow, marking the first significant defeat of the Wehrmacht in World War II. The battle's outcome shattered the myth of German invincibility and boosted Soviet morale. The Battle of Moscow's significance cannot be overstated. It marked the end of the German advance into the Soviet Union and the beginning of a long and brutal war of attrition on the Eastern Front. The successful defense of Moscow was a turning point that contributed to the eventual Soviet victory in World War II. Operation Barbarossa concluded unsuccessfully by December 5, 1941. The German advance was halted, and the Soviets began to push back, initiating a brutal war of attrition that would last until 1945. The immediate consequence was a shift in momentum. The Soviets gained confidence, while the German forces faced their first major setback. Both sides suffered enormous losses. German casualties were over 750,000 by the end of 1941, while Soviet losses were even higher, with millions of soldiers killed, wounded, or captured. Territory initially lost to the Germans began to be reclaimed by the Soviets, reversing earlier gains made by the Wehrmacht. The war crimes and atrocities committed during this period were horrendous. The Germans' hunger plan aimed to starve millions of Soviet citizens, and Einsatzgruppen death squads carried out mass executions. The suffering of civilians during sieges, especially in Leningrad, was immense. One of the most significant battles following Barbarossa was the Battle of Stalingrad. This brutal confrontation from August 1942 to February 1943 became a symbol of Soviet determination and marked the definitive turning point in the war on the Eastern Front. The encirclement and eventual defeat of the German Sixth Army shattered the myth of Nazi invincibility and bolstered Soviet resolve. We've explored the German strategy, Soviet resilience, key battles, and the immense human cost. Did you know that Hitler expected Operation Barbarossa to be over in just a few months? Operation Husky began on the night of July 9th to 10th, 1943, marking the Allies' first major amphibious assault on Axis territory. The invasion targeted the southern coast of Sicily. The American 7th Army, under General Patton, landed at the Gulf of Gila, with key locations including Gila, Licata, and Scogliti. The British 8th Army, led by General Montgomery, landed on the southeast at Syracuse and Pacino. The Canadian 1st Infantry Division, part of the British 8th Army, landed near Pacino, significantly securing the southeastern coast. The operation commenced with a coordinated airborne assault. Paratroopers from the U.S. 82nd Airborne Division and the British 1st Airborne Division were dropped behind enemy lines to disrupt Axis defenses and secure key positions. This initial phase encountered challenges due to strong winds and scattered drops, yet they managed to sow confusion among the Axis forces. The following morning, the main amphibious assault began. The American and British forces landed along the southern coast of Sicily, facing fierce resistance and logistical hurdles. Despite these challenges, they secured their beachheads by the end of the day. Naval bombardments and air support played crucial roles in suppressing Axis defenses. The success of the initial landings allowed the Allies to establish a foothold on the island, paving the way for the inland advance in subsequent battles that would eventually lead to the liberation of Sicily and set the stage for the invasion of mainland Italy. The Axis forces were strategically positioned to defend against the invasion. The Italian 6th Army, under General Alfredo Guzzoni, had several coastal divisions. The Livorno Division was stationed near Gila, while the Napoli Division was located around the Licata area. German forces, including the Hermann Göring Division, were positioned inland near Caltagirone and Piazza Armerina, ready to launch counterattacks. Additionally, elements of the 15th Panzer Grenadier Division were situated around Nicosia, poised to support defensive efforts and counter Allied advance. We're going to see how these maneuvers paved the way for the Allied invasion of mainland Italy. Before the daring assault on Sicily, the Mediterranean theater was a vital battleground in 1943. Following the successful North African campaign, the Allies had gained a crucial foothold. The Axis powers, primarily Italy and Germany, held significant positions in southern Europe, including Sicily, Greece, and the Balkans. Greece was under heavy Axis occupation, with resistance movements facing brutal suppression. The Mediterranean Sea was essential for supply routes. The Allies, leveraging their naval superiority and key bases like Malta, sought to dominate these waters, challenging the Axis-controlled sea lanes and preparing for further invasions. Key decisions for Operation Husky were made during several high-level Allied conferences. At the Casablanca Conference in January 1943, Roosevelt, Churchill, and their military advisors prioritized the invasion of Sicily. This strategic decision aimed to weaken Axis powers in southern Europe and establish a strong foothold for future operations. The logistical efforts for Operation Husky were immense. Approximately 2,590 ships and landing craft were assembled, carrying 160,000 troops, 14,000 vehicles, 600 tanks, and about 4,000 aircraft. Troops were amassed in North Africa, primarily in Algeria and Tunisia, where they underwent extensive training and preparation. Key harbors such as Algiers, Oran, and Bizerte were utilized for staging the operation. The Allies orchestrated a massive movement of men, equipment, and supplies across the Mediterranean, coordinating naval convoys, air support, and landing operations. The success of these preparations was crucial for the complex amphibious assault on Sicily. The Mafia, particularly under the influence of mobster Lucky Luciano, played a covert but significant role in the preparation for the Allied landing in Sicily. As part of Operation Underworld, Luciano, imprisoned in the United States, was approached by the Office of Naval Intelligence for his connections in Sicily. This collaboration aimed to safeguard the New York waterfront from Axis sabotage and gather crucial intelligence. In exchange for favorable treatment, Luciano facilitated communication between the Allies and the Sicilian Mafia. This collaboration helped gather intelligence on Axis defenses and secured cooperation from local populations, easing the Allies' advance inland. The Axis powers, primarily Italian and German forces, quickly mobilized to defend Sicily. The Italians, led by General Alfredo Guzzoni, focused on holding key positions with coastal fortifications. The Germans, under the command of General Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, particularly the Hermann Göring Division and the 15th Panzergrenadier Division, aimed to launch rapid counterattacks and exploit any weaknesses in the Allied lines. Near Gela, German and Italian forces launched coordinated counterattacks, attempting to push the Americans back into the sea. In the Battle of Troina, the German 15th Panzergrenadier Division mounted a fierce defense against advancing Allied forces, resulting in several days of intense fighting. Despite initial successes, these counterattacks were ultimately repelled by the Allies. The Allies faced numerous challenges during these counterattacks. Harsh terrain and strong Axis fortifications slowed their advance. Additionally, the well-coordinated Axis counterattacks inflicted significant casualties and disrupted supply lines. Adverse weather conditions further complicated operations, affecting air support and logistics. In response to the fierce Axis resistance, the Allies adjusted their tactics and strategies. They increased coordination between air, naval, and ground forces to better support frontline troops. Additionally, they adapted to the challenging terrain by using more mobile and flexible units. The Allies also intensified their efforts to disrupt Axis supply lines and communication networks, weakening the enemy's ability to mount effective counterattacks. Following the initial landings, the Allies advanced inland, capturing key towns and cities. Syracuse fell quickly, providing a crucial port for supplies. Key battles occurred in and around towns such as Nicosia, Adrano, and Messina. The Battle of Troina, in particular, was intense and pivotal. The terrain of Sicily, with its mountainous regions and rugged landscapes, presented significant challenges. These natural obstacles slowed the Allied advance and provided strong defensive positions for Axis forces. Interaction with Sicilian civilians varied. In some areas, locals provided valuable intelligence and support, while in others, they were wary of the foreign troops. The role of partisan and resistance groups was crucial, as they conducted sabotage operations and assisted the Allies with local knowledge. As the Allies pushed towards Messina, their final objective on the island, they faced continuous resistance, but ultimately succeeded in capturing the city, effectively securing Sicily and setting the stage for the invasion of mainland Italy. Following the successful capture of Sicily, the Allies prepared to invade mainland Italy. On August 17, 1943, Allied forces crossed the Strait of Messina, landing on the Italian mainland. This strategic move aimed to force Italy out of the war and draw German resources away from the Eastern Front. On September 8, 1943, the Armistice of Cassibile was announced, marking Italy's surrender to the Allies and significantly altering the dynamics of the campaign. Subsequently, on October 13, 1943, Italy declared war on Germany, officially switching sides and joining the Allies. On September 9, 1943, the Allies launched Operation Avalanche, landing in Salerno, south of Naples. The operation aimed to quickly capture the port and advance inland. Despite facing strong German resistance, the operation successfully established a beachhead, allowing the Allies to begin their push northward. Simultaneously, Operation Slapstick involved a British airborne landing at Taranto and Brindisi on September 9, 1943. The objective was to secure these ports and facilitate the movement of troops and supplies. The operation met with little resistance, enabling the Allies to gain a strategic foothold in southern Italy with minimal casualties. After securing southern Italy, the Allies advanced northward, facing tough German defenses in a series of battles. The campaign began with the invasion at Salerno. The Allies then pushed through the Gustav Line, a formidable German defensive line, leading to the brutal Battle of Monte Cassino from January to May 1944. The breaking of the Gustav Line allowed Allied forces to capture Rome on June 4, 1944. The advance involved significant battles, including the Anzio Landing, Operation Shingle, in January 1944, which was crucial for outflanking German defenses and hastening the capture of Rome. Subsequent operations targeted the Hitler Line and the Winter Line, further weakening German positions. Operation Husky resulted in significant casualties, with the Allies suffering around 24,000 and the Axis approximately 29,000. The invasion dealt a severe blow to Axis morale and resources, weakening their control over southern Europe. It marked the start of the Italian campaign, leading to Mussolini's downfall and Italy's switch to the Allied side. The liberation of Sicily paved the way for the invasion of mainland Italy and highlighted the resilience of Sicilian civilians. The campaign's success influenced post-war reconstruction and political developments in Italy. Operation Husky was a pivotal Allied victory, marking the beginning of the end for Axis powers in southern Europe. The successful invasion of Sicily showcased the Allies' strategic prowess and resilience. World War II in Europe culminated in Germany's unconditional surrender on May 8, 1945, known as VE Day. This marked the end of a conflict that had ravaged the continent for 6 years, resulting in unprecedented destruction and loss of life. The road to victory was paved by key events, including the D-Day invasion, the liberation of occupied territories, and crucial strategic decisions made by Allied leaders. How did we get here? Our chronicle begins 11 months earlier, with the historic D-Day landings, the critical turning point of World War II that set the stage for the Allied advance into Nazi-occupied Europe. On June 6, 1944, Operation Overlord commenced, marking the largest amphibious invasion in history. Under the supreme command of General Dwight D. Eisenhower for the Allies and Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt for the Germans, over 156,000 Allied troops from the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, and other nations landed on 5 beachheads along the Normandy coast of France. The invasion force comprised of 5,000 ships and landing craft, supported by 11,000 aircraft, providing air cover and bombardment. The invasion was meticulously planned with the aim of breaching Hitler's Atlantic Wall and establishing a Western front. The beachheads were codenamed Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. American forces landed on Utah and Omaha, British forces on Gold and Sword, and Canadian forces on Juno. At Utah Beach, the 4th Infantry Division faced minimal resistance and quickly secured their objectives. Omaha Beach, however, saw the heaviest fighting, with the 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions encountering fierce German defenses and suffering approximately 2,400 casualties. British forces at Gold Beach faced moderate resistance and linked up with Canadian forces from Juno Beach, who overcame significant obstacles to secure their landing zone. Sword Bay saw the British 3rd Infantry Division make steady progress despite strong opposition, linking up with airborne units that had parachuted in earlier. By the end of June, Allied forces had secured all 5 beachheads and began pushing inland. The British and Canadians advanced towards Caen, while American forces moved towards Cherbourg. Throughout July and August, the Allies fought through the dense hedgerows of Normandy in a brutal battle of attrition. By mid-August, Allied forces had broken through German defenses in Normandy. The pivotal battles of St. Lo and the Falaise Pocket, led by General Omar Bradley, decimated German positions, paving the way for a rapid advance. The Allies pushed towards Paris, with the French 2nd Armored Division under General Philippe Leclerc and the U.S. 4th Infantry Division spearheading the liberation. On August 25, Paris was liberated after an uprising by the French resistance, supported by incoming Allied forces. The German commander of Paris, General Dietrich von Choltitz, defied Hitler's orders to destroy the city, surrendering instead. This victory was symbolic and strategic, marking the collapse of Nazi control in France. In the meantime, Operation Dragoon, launched on August 15, 1944, was the Allied invasion of southern France. It aimed to secure vital ports and facilitate a rapid advance into France, complementing the efforts in Normandy. Coordinated with Operation Overlord, Dragoon sought to relieve pressure on Allied forces in northern France by opening a second front. The invasion began under the command of General Alexander Patch of the U.S. 7th Army, along with French General Jean de La Tour de Tasigny leading the French 1st Army. The forces comprised American, British, French, and Canadian troops, with the primary landing zones along the Côte d'Azur. Key objectives included the ports of Marseille and Toulon. The initial landings, met with relatively light resistance, allowed the Allies to quickly establish a beachhead. American and French forces swiftly liberated Toulon and Marseille by the end of August, securing these crucial ports for logistical support. The rapid advance continued through Provence, with key battles fought at Montélimar and the Rhone Valley. The German forces, commanded by General Friedrich Weiss, struggled to mount effective resistance against the well-coordinated Allied assault. Allied troops pushed northward, overcoming German defensive positions in the Vosges Mountains. By mid-September, they had reached the Moselle River, where they linked up with forces advancing from Normandy. On September 17, Operation Market Garden was launched, an ambitious plan aimed at capturing key bridges in the Netherlands to establish a rapid northern route into Germany. The operation was spearheaded by Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery and involved the largest airborne assault in history, with over 35,000 troops from the British 1st Airborne Division, the US 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, and the Polish 1st Parachute Brigade. The strategic goal was to secure bridges across the Maas, Waal, and Rhine rivers, facilitating a swift advance into the Ruhr industrial heartland. However, the operation faced formidable German forces under the command of Field Marshal Walter Model. These forces included the 9th and 10th SS Panzer Divisions, which had been underestimated by Allied intelligence. These well-equipped and experienced units offered fierce resistance, particularly at Arnhem. The critical bridge at Arnhem proved a bridge too far, with the British 1st Airborne Division facing encirclement and overwhelming German firepower, ultimately being forced to retreat. The failure of Operation Market Garden delayed the Allied advance and highlighted the risks of ambitious operations. It also underscored the need for a more cautious and coordinated approach in subsequent campaigns. On December 16, 1944, a surprise German counteroffensive in the Ardennes, led by Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, was launched, aimed at splitting the Allied forces and capturing the vital Belgian port of Antwerp. The Germans amassed a force of over 200,000 troops, 1,000 tanks, and extensive artillery. The offensive created a bulge in the Allied lines, catching them off guard and initially making significant advances. However, the harsh winter conditions and staunch American resistance, particularly at Bastogne, slowed the German advance. The battle's significance lay in its depletion of German resources and manpower, which were already stretched thin. The Allies, under the command of General Dwight D. Eisenhower, quickly regrouped and launched a counteroffensive. By January 25, 1945, the Bulge was eliminated and German forces were pushed back. This battle marked the last major German offense of the war and significantly weakened their ability to resist the advancing Allied armies, paving the way for the final push into Germany. In March 1945, crossing the Rhine River marked a crucial step in the Allied invasion of Germany. The capture of the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen on March 7 was particularly significant. American forces led by General Courtney Hodges seized the bridge intact, allowing troops to establish a bridgehead on the eastern bank of the Rhine. This unexpected gain enabled the Allies to swiftly transport men and equipment across the river, bypassing what was expected to be a heavily fortified German defense. The successful crossing of the Rhine shattered the formidable Siegfried Line, Germany's last major line of defense on the Western Front. With the Rhine breached, Allied forces, including the US 1st and 3rd Armies and the British 2nd Army, advanced rapidly into the heart of Germany. This maneuver facilitated the encirclement and eventual surrender of numerous German divisions, accelerating the collapse of Nazi resistance. In January 1945, the Soviet Union launched the Vistula Order Offensive, a major military campaign on the Eastern Front. Under the command of Marshals Gregory Zhukov and Ian Konev, Soviet forces rapidly advanced from the Vistula River in Poland to the Oder River in Germany. This offensive resulted in the capture of Warsaw in January 17, 1945, liberating the Polish capital from Nazi control. As the Soviets pressed forward, they advanced through East Prussia, encountering fierce resistance but steadily overcoming German defenses. By March 1945, Soviet troops had reached the Oder River, just 70 kilometers from Berlin. The German forces, commanded by Colonel General Heinrich Himmler, struggled to halt the Soviet advance, but were ultimately unable to prevent the Red Army from reaching the outskirts of Berlin. Coordination between Western Allies and Soviet forces became crucial during this period. The Allies, having crossed the Rhine, and the Soviets, closing in from the east, effectively encircled Germany, leading to a strategic pincer movement. The Battle of Berlin, the final major offensive in the European theater, began in April 1945. Soviet forces, led by Marshals Gregory Zhukov and Ian Konev, launched a massive assault on the German capital. The city was defended by a mix of exhausted Wehrmacht units, Volkssturm militia, and Hitler Youth, all under the control of General Helmut Widling. Intense urban combat ensued, with Soviet troops fighting street by street to capture Berlin. Amidst the chaos, Adolf Hitler committed suicide in his Führerbunker on April 30, 1945, appointing Grand Admiral Karl Brunitz as his successor. Hitler's death marked the collapse of Nazi leadership and morale. On May 2, 1945, Berlin's garrison surrendered to the Soviets, and on May 8, 1945, Germany unconditionally surrendered to the Allied forces, marking VE Day. The German surrender officially ended World War II in Europe, bringing relief to millions and setting the stage for post-war reconstruction and the reshaping of the geopolitical landscape. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and click the bell icon for notifications on future uploads. Your support helps us continue bringing you detailed historical content. Thank you for watching.